My name is Mason. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 5 years I thought I was building something real with the woman I loved. Her name is Lauren. She's 29. And for nearly 2 of those years we've been engaged. Or at least I thought we were moving toward marriage. Now, I'm not so sure anymore. And the more I think about it, the more it feels like the foundation of our relationship has quietly begun to crack beneath my feet. Professionally, I'm a mechanical engineer. It's a good job, steady, well-paying, and intellectually satisfying. But my real escape, my therapy, has always been woodworking. I started carving and crafting as a teenager, mostly tinkering in my grandfather's garage, and over the years it evolved from a hobby into something deeper. Creating something with my own 2 hands, whether it's a piece of furniture, a detailed sculpture, or a delicate bit of jewelry, it gives me purpose, especially when life feels chaotic. So, when it came time to propose to Lauren, I didn't just want to walk into a jewelry store, drop a few $1,000s and pick out a ring from a glass case. That felt impersonal, like I was going through the motions instead of creating a true symbol of what we had. Instead, I decided to design and build the engagement ring myself. I spent weeks planning every detail. The band was rose gold, simple and elegant. At its center was a deep blue sapphire, chosen not just for its beauty, but because Lauren has always said she prefers unique, understated jewelry over flashy diamonds. I poured my heart into that ring. The materials alone cost me $2,600, 0 cents, but the real investment was time, countless hours sanding, shaping, and polishing until it was perfect. When I finally proposed, Lauren burst into tears, happy tears. She kept saying how beautiful the ring was and how much it meant to her that I had made it by hand. She showed it off to everyone, family, friends, co-workers, proudly telling them that her fiancé had crafted it from scratch. It felt like everything was falling into place. For nearly 2 years, she wore it every day. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was a piece of me, a symbol of our shared future. We started planning our wedding together, down to the tiniest details: venues, color schemes, floral arrangements, guest lists, and even the design of our custom table settings. We were deep in the weeds of planning, and it was exhausting but exciting. But then, about 3 weeks ago, something changed. We were getting ready to go out to dinner, and I noticed her hand was bare, no ring. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she'd taken it off while cleaning or washing dishes. She's done that before. I let it go. But then it happened again, the next day, and the day after that. She wasn't wearing it at all anymore. That's when I started to worry. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe the ring was damaged. Maybe she'd misplaced it and was too embarrassed to tell me. So one evening while we were lounging on the couch, I asked casually, "Hey, I haven't seen your ring lately. Did something happen to it?" She hesitated, just for a beat, and then said, "Oh, I took it to the jeweler to get it cleaned." Now, that caught me off guard. I've always been the one who maintained that ring. If it ever needed polishing or fixing, I handled it myself. That's part of what made it special. It was a living part of our relationship, not something outsourced to a stranger. Her answer didn't sit right with me. Still, I didn't want to come across as suspicious or controlling, so I just nodded and said, "Oh, okay." But deep down, I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. Days went by, still no ring. One evening I brought it up again, trying to sound casual. "So, when's your ring coming back from the jeweler?" She barely looked up and replied, "It's taking a little longer than expected. They're really busy." That answer only made things worse. What kind of jeweler takes more than a week to clean a ring? I've cleaned that ring myself in 10 minutes. It wasn't adding up. But again, I kept my doubts to myself. I convinced myself I was just being paranoid, that there had to be some simple, innocent explanation. But the more time passed, the more it felt like something had shifted between us. Every time I looked at her hand, I started looking around the house, hoping maybe she'd just taken it off and forgotten where she put it. I checked her nightstand, her jewelry tray, even the kitchen counter, where she sometimes left things while cooking. Nothing. I debated asking her again, but I didn't want to sound obsessive. If something was wrong, surely she would come clean eventually, right? Still, the suspicion wouldn't let go of me. I started to question everything. Was this just me overreacting, or was I uncovering a truth I didn't want to face? 3 weeks passed, no ring. And Lauren? She acted like everything was perfectly normal. She smiled, laughed, talked about wedding details. It was surreal, like I was watching someone play the role of my fiancé while hiding a secret behind her eyes. Then, one night over dinner, she dropped another surprise. "Oh, by the way," she said between bites, "I'm going on a weekend trip with Kelly and Jenny, just a little girl's getaway." She said it so casually, like it was no big deal, like nothing in our world had changed. I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. "A trip? When did this come up?" She shrugged, not even looking up. We've all been really stressed and we thought, why not take a weekend off? Just a quiet little escape, nothing fancy. We're renting a cabin upstate. And that's when everything clicked, or maybe cracked wide open. We had been pinching every penny lately. Between the looming expenses of our wedding, the need to replace my aging, unreliable car, and a few surprise costs that had popped up earlier in the year, Lauren and I made a mutual decision to scale back on everything non-essential. No weekend getaways, no impulse buys, not even our usual Friday night dinners out. It wasn't fun, but it felt necessary, like we were doing the responsible thing together. We even had a budget spreadsheet. Every dollar was accounted for, and we both had access to it. That's why, when she suddenly mentioned going on a weekend trip with her friends, I felt completely blindsided. She brought it up so casually, almost like it was an afterthought, just something that had slipped her mind until dinner. I tried not to let my voice betray the confusion swirling inside me. How long have you been planning this? She waved a hand dismissively, brushing it off. Not long. Kelly brought it up, and Jenny's in too. We've all been so stressed lately, we figured a little time away would help. Just a weekend at a cabin, nothing crazy. Still, something felt off. We had spent months being extremely disciplined about money. Every time we passed by our favorite brunch spot or skipped buying concert tickets, we reminded ourselves that the sacrifices were worth it, that this wedding, our future, was more important. So this sudden change in behavior was more important. How much is it going to cost? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Lauren shrugged. Not much. We're splitting everything. The cabin was a deal, and it's just for a couple of days. It won't break the bank. Her answers were vague, uncharacteristically so. Lauren wasn't usually evasive, especially not about money. Where are you getting the money for this? I pressed. We've been saving like crazy. Every extra cent we had was supposed to go toward the wedding and the car. She barely looked up from her phone. Don't worry about it. I've been setting aside a little here and there. But that didn't make sense. We shared everything about our finances, and she'd never once mentioned saving separately for something like this. I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. Still, it gnawed at me. The next night, I came home from work and found her in the bedroom, packing. Clothes lay out on the bed, a duffel bag half-zipped, toiletries stacked neatly in a case. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a hypothetical getaway anymore. It was happening. She was leaving in less than 48 hours. Even then, I tried not to overreact. Maybe I was making too big a deal out of it, but the more I watched her carefully folding each item of clothing, the more the pit in my stomach grew. The following morning, I brought it up again, still trying to play it cool. So, what's the plan for this trip? Are you splitting all the costs? Gas, food, everything? She let out a sigh, clearly frustrated that I was still asking. Yes, Mason, it's all taken care of. Kelly found a great deal and we're dividing the costs evenly. Even so, I continued carefully, it's not just the cabin, right? There's food, drinks, travel. It adds up. Are you sure this is the right time to be spending like this? She rolled her eyes and tossed her phone onto the couch. Why are you making this such a big deal? It's just a weekend. I need this. You act like I'm blowing our life savings. It wasn't her words that worried me. It was her tone, defensive, frustrated, like I was being unreasonable for even asking questions. I'm not trying to fight, I said gently. I just want to understand. We've been so tight with money and this feels sudden. Where exactly did the money come from? Her expression shifted, just for a split second. A flicker of hesitation passed over her face before she turned away. I told you, she said, a little too quickly. I've got it handled. I stood there, watching her closely. That's not an answer, I replied, my voice firmer now. We've been planning every expense together for months, down to the last detail, and now you suddenly have cash for a trip that you never even mentioned until 2 days ago? I'm not angry, but I need to know, where did the money come from? She turned to face me, clearly annoyed, her arms folded tight. Fine, she snapped, throwing her hands up. If you must know, I pawned my ring, okay? That's where the money came from. Silence. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to process what she'd said. You pawned your engagement ring? I asked, barely above a whisper. She didn't even flinch. Yeah, I needed the money. It's not gone forever, I'll get it back after the trip. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. I had crafted that ring with my own hands. Each curve, each polish, each piney engraving was a piece of me. I didn't just buy it, I made it. And now she was telling me she handed it over to a pawn shop like it was nothing more than a trade-off for a weekend with her friends? My voice cracked as I spoke. Lauren, that ring, it wasn't just jewelry. I made it for you. I poured weeks into it. That wasn't just something off a shelf. She crossed her arms tighter. It's my ring. I didn't think I needed your permission to decide what to do with it. Besides, it's not like I sold it, it's temporary. That's not the point, I said, trying to steady my voice. You made a huge decision that affects both of us without even telling me. That ring was supposed to symbolize our relationship, and you just got rid of it like it meant nothing. I didn't get rid of it, she fired back. I'm getting it back. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Her words echoed in the air, but it wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Her tone sharp, her body stiff, her face set in that infuriating mask of indifference. It felt like I was speaking a different language, like we weren't even on the same page anymore. To her, it was just a pawn ticket, just a temporary transaction, but to me, it was the unraveling of something sacred. I took a breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Lauren, I began slowly, choosing each word with care. I really don't think this is the right time for a trip. We've been saving so hard, and pawning your engagement ring. She folded her arms across her chest, defiant. Well, I can't cancel now. I already told Kelly and Jenny I'm going. We've been planning it, and I need this break. There it was again, that final amini in her voice. She was going. End of discussion. I stood there, stunned into silence. I could have argued, pushed harder, made a scene, maybe even found a way to stop her. But why bother? If she couldn't see why this was a problem, if she couldn't even pause to acknowledge my concerns, what was the point? The next morning, without a hint of hesitation, she packed her bags. She zipped up her suitcase like she was preparing for any other ordinary trip. No tension, no guilt, just routine. As she slung her overnight bag over her shoulder and walked toward the door, she called out over her shoulder, "We'll talk when I get back." I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen in place, watching the door close behind her. A heavy silence settled over the room, thicker than any argument we'd ever had. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth. Whatever conversation we had after this wouldn't fix anything. Something had shifted, maybe permanently. I sank into the couch, numb. What the hell just happened? I muttered to no one. She had pawned the ring I had made with my own hands, hours of careful labor, all for her, a token of our commitment, and she handed it over for a few days of laughter and cocktails with her friends, like it meant nothing. I tried to move past it. I told myself not to get worked up while she was gone, but the longer I sat there, the harder that became. It wasn't just the ring, or the trip, it was everything surrounding it, the way she handled it, the complete lack of transparency, how easily she dismissed my feelings. I kept replaying her expressions, her tone, her choice of words. None of it felt like the woman I thought I knew. For the next hour, I mindlessly scrolled through my phone, trying to distract myself. But every few seconds, my thoughts circled back to her. Lauren had never been impulsive. She wasn't someone who made decisions on the fly, especially not when money was tight. None of this aligned with the person I fell in love with. So, I started digging. If she wasn't going to give me the full story, I'd have to find it myself. I began with Kelly and Jenny. I've never really clicked with those two. They're the kind of people who seem to thrive on chaos, chasing drama like it's a sport. From what I knew, their idea of a weekend getaway usually involved crowded bars, bad choices, and waking up with headaches and regrets. The idea of them suddenly planning a serene cabin retreat in the woods, I wasn't buying it. I opened Instagram and searched for Kelly's profile. Sure enough, she had just posted. The photo was of a gorgeous, sprawling cabin surrounded by pine trees, all bathed in soft golden light. It looked like something out of a luxury travel magazine. The caption read, "Girls' weekend begins, let's go." What really caught my eye, though, was the line just below it. "Shout out to my man for helping make this trip happen. You're the best." Wait, what? Lauren never mentioned anything about Kelly's boyfriend paying for the trip. She specifically said they were all splitting the cost equally. That was the whole justification, right? It's cheap, it's fair, it's no big deal. But if someone's boyfriend was bankrolling even part of it, what else wasn't she telling me? Suddenly, a theory started forming in my mind. Maybe Lauren didn't have the money. Maybe she needed to pawn the ring because Kelly and Jenny were spending more than she could afford, and she didn't want to be the odd one out. Lauren had always admired Kelly's carefree spirit, her confidence, her live-in-the-moment energy. I'd seen it before. Lauren trying to match her stride for stride. Was she trying to keep up now, even if it meant hiding it from me? The more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. I scrolled through Kelly's feed some more, but the rest of her posts were vague: selfies, wine glasses, clothes on a bed with captions like "packing chaos." Nothing incriminating. Next, I checked Jenny's profile. She's usually quieter online, but even she had posted something. A short boomerang in her story, her and Kelly clinking champagne glasses, grinning ear to ear. The caption read, "Cabin vibes." And in the background, a bar setup. Not a little wine corner or a few bottles of rosé. I'm talking full-on, top-shelf liquor lineup, vodka, whiskey, gin, mixers, everything. This wasn't some shoestring cabin getaway. This was a luxury vacation. Lauren had said it would be quiet, affordable, relaxing. Everything I was seeing told a very different story. I felt the knot in my stomach twist tighter. Why the lies? Why the secrecy? If it was just a fun weekend, why paint it like it was something else? I tried to rationalize. Maybe Kelly and Jenny were just showboating online. Maybe they were making things seem more extravagant than they really were. Social media does that. People fake it all the time. But that small, gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Something was off. That's when I noticed it. Lauren's laptop, sitting on the kitchen counter, closed but unmistakably hers. She must have forgotten it in her rush to leave. I stood there, frozen, staring at her laptop. It was just sitting on the kitchen counter, the way you might set down your keys when you're in a hurry. Part of me hesitated opening it, felt wrong, invasive, like crossing a line I never imagined I'd even consider. But at the same time, she'd already stepped far beyond any line I thought we had. She'd hidden things from me, pawned the ring I spent weeks crafting with my own hands, and dismissed my feelings like they were background noise. The longer I stared at the closed laptop, the more the rational part of my mind gave way to something deeper, something that said, "You deserve to know." So I stepped forward, popped the lid open, and powered it on. Her password was one I already knew. We'd shared that level of trust once. The screen lit up, and with a few clicks I found myself inside her message threads. Her group chat with Kelly and Jenny was right at the top. I clicked, and instantly the pit in my stomach began to twist tighter. The chat wasn't what I expected. At first it was small talk, emojis, and plans, but then I read further. This wasn't just some quiet weekend escape into woods. They were planning wild nights out, bar hopping, drinking to blackout levels, meeting random guys just to see what happens. My heart started pounding. Then came a message from Kelly that made my blood run cold. "Leave the ring at home. No one needs to know you're engaged this weekend." My hands curled around the edge of the counter, knuckles white. I reread the message, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood, but no, it was clear, crystal clear. Then Jenny chimed in. "Yeah, this is your chance to have some fun before locking yourself down. Don't let him hold you back." Lauren's response? A laughing emoji, followed by, "Sure, I could definitely use a little freedom." Freedom. That word didn't just hit me, it gutted me. Freedom from what exactly? From me, from the life we'd been building together for the past 5 years? From the man who hand-carved her engagement ring and spent countless hours planning a wedding she claimed to want? I kept scrolling, desperate for something, anything, that might make it all make sense. A joke, a line that showed Lauren pushing back, some hint that she wasn't all in on this. But it never came. If anything, it got worse. Jenny made another joke about how no one had to know they were pretending to be single for the weekend. And Lauren? She didn't protest. She didn't even question it. She laughed along like this was some harmless game. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. This wasn't just about a ring anymore. It wasn't even about the trip. It was about trust. Something so fundamental, so essential. And now, I could see just how carelessly she was willing to throw it away. I sat there in silence, the screen's glow reflecting off my stunned expression. I wanted to close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen any of it, pretend we could go back to before, but I couldn't lie to myself. For a fleeting moment, I considered calling her, maybe confront her, maybe ask her what the hell she was thinking. But what would I even say? "Hey Lauren, I just read your group chat and now I know you've been lying to me." That wasn't a conversation to have over the phone. And it wouldn't fix anything. No, whatever this was, whatever was left, it was already broken, and I wasn't going to keep pretending that it wasn't. That's when it hit me. I couldn't stay in this relationship. I couldn't marry someone who looked me in the eye, told me she loved me, and then walked out the door with a lie on her lips and betrayal packed in her suitcase. If she was willing to do this now, before we were even married, what would the future hold? Secrets? More lies? Deeper betrayals? I looked around the apartment. The save-the-date cards on the table, the flower samples, the wedding binder, all of it felt like a cruel joke. I grabbed my own laptop and opened it. I didn't even hesitate. I pulled up our wedding documents, our bookings, and our vendor contracts. The list was long. Venue, caterer, florist, photographer. At first, I wasn't sure what I was doing. It felt impulsive, almost like I was watching myself from the outside. But deep down, I knew what had to be done. I started calling. Canceling the venue hurt. We'd spent months searching for it, finally landing on the perfect spot by the lake. The deposit was gone, non-refundable, but I didn't care. As I hung up the phone with the coordinator, I felt lighter, like I'd just stepped out of a shadow. Next, I called the caterer. Then the florist. Each cancellation brought a new wave of emotion, anger, sadness, but mostly clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming my dignity. I wasn't going to walk down the aisle with someone who didn't respect me enough to be honest. And yet, even that wasn't enough. Lauren was still out there, still pretending, still laughing with her friends about how they could get away with it. I couldn't stop thinking about those messages, how Kelly and Jenny had encouraged her, how they were all playing this off like it was harmless fun. But it wasn't harmless. It was dishonest, cruel, and not just to me. What about their boyfriends, the other men in their lives? Did they know their girlfriends were out pretending to be single, planning to flirt with strangers and keep it a secret? Probably not. That realization burned in me. It wasn't just about me anymore. Those guys, whoever they were, deserved to know the truth, just like I now know mine. If they were anything like me, they were in the dark, trusting women who had no problem stepping outside the lines. I wasn't going to let that slide, not this time. They wanted to play games, but I was ready to make sure the truth came to light. I picked up my phone, my hands trembling slightly as I opened Instagram. I didn't even have to search long. Kelly's boyfriend, Mark, was right there in her photos, tagged in dozens of posts. His account was public, and his DMs were open. I stared at the message box for a moment, trying to figure out the right words. "Hey Mark," I began typing. "I know this is coming out of nowhere, but I'm Lauren's fiancé. I just found some messages between her, Kelly, and Jenny about the trip they're on. I think you deserve to know what's going on." I attached a set of screenshots, starting with the message where Kelly said to leave the engagement rings behind and pretend they were single. I made sure to include the parts where they talked about meeting guys, getting wasted, and having freedom for the weekend. I read the message twice, checked the screenshots again, and then hit send. Next was Jenny's boyfriend, Jake. He was a little harder to find, his account wasn't linked in her bio, but after a few minutes of scrolling, I found a photo of the two of them at some festival, tagged. His profile was private, but the message button was available. I sent him the same message, with the same screenshots. After that, a wave of nervous energy hit me. What if they thought I was making it up? What if they didn't believe me, or worse, what if they turned it around on me? But I didn't have to wait long. Mark replied first. "Wait, are you serious?" he typed. "Kelly told me they were just going to a cabin to relax. She didn't mention anything about bars or pretending to be single." Minutes later, Jake's message popped up. "Dude, thanks for this. Jenny made it sound like it was just a chill weekend with the girls. I had no idea." Both of them were shocked, understandably upset, and asking questions. I spent the next hour explaining everything. How I'd found the group chat, how Lauren had pawned her ring without telling me, and how this wasn't just about one bad decision, it was a pattern of lies. Mark was furious. "I've had a weird feeling about this trip since the day she mentioned it," he told me. "I should have trusted my gut." In the next couple of hours, the fallout began to unfold. Mark messaged again. "Dude, it's been chaos." I confronted Kelly. At first, she acted like it was no big deal, tried to laugh it off. Then she said Lauren was the one who suggested leaving the rings behind. That was the final straw for him. He packed a bag and walked out. "I moved out tonight," he wrote. "I'm done." But I wasn't going to play her game. Not anymore. "Come back so we can talk properly," I texted. "If not, don't expect to find me here when you return. That's all I'm saying." No reply, just silence. The next night, well past sunset, the door opened. I didn't even hear her walk in at first, but then I heard her voice, sharp, accusatory, slicing through the quiet. "Mason, are you serious right now?" I turned to see her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, her face flushed with anger. She looked furious, but underneath that, I could see a shock, disbelief. She never expected this. "Glad you decided to come back," I said calmly. "I wasn't going to raise my voice, not tonight." "I can't believe you," she snapped. "Kelly and Jenny are livid, Mark and Jake are blowing up their phones, and now it's all falling on me. What were you thinking?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "I was thinking it's time for some honesty," I replied. "You said we'd talk when you got back, so here we are, let's talk." She scoffed and dropped her overnight bag onto the floor with a loud thud. "This is how you handle things? Sticking your nose into other people's relationships? You've made everything worse." "You want to talk about making things worse?" I shot back. "I asked you to come home so we could talk. I gave you that chance. But this isn't about Kelly or Jenny. This is about us, Lauren." She let out a dramatic sigh, like she was the one who'd been wronged, like she was the one burdened by all this. "Fine," she said, her voice thick with sarcasm. "You clearly want to get something off your chest, so go ahead." I stood there, facing her, taking in every detail of her posture. arms crossed, expression hard, eyes narrowed like I was the one who'd betrayed her. It was surreal how defensive and combative she was, completely blind to where I was coming from. All the pressure I'd been holding in finally burst. "I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore," I said, my voice level but sharp with emotion. "You've been lying, keeping things from me, making decisions that affect both of us without even thinking twice. And the worst part? When I try to talk about it, you act like I'm the problem." Her eyes narrowed further, her voice rising in frustration. "You're being ridiculous. I haven't lied to you about anything." I raised an eyebrow, my patience fraying. "Really? So when you told me this trip was just a relaxing getaway, that wasn't a lie? When you kept me in the dark about how you even paid for it, that wasn't lying by omission?" She hesitated just for a second. A flicker of guilt, or at least hesitation, crossed her face before her attitude returned full force. "I told you where the money came from," she snapped. "And it wasn't some wild party like you're trying to make it sound. We just needed a break. I don't see why this is such a big deal." I took a step closer, keeping my voice calm but firm. "The big deal is that you didn't think it was important to tell me any of this. You didn't think it mattered, to be honest. Do you even understand what it feels like to be left completely in the dark, to find out everything after it happens? Like, I don't even deserve to know." She rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Mason. It was just a weekend with my friends. It's not like I cheated on you." "You still don't get it," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't just about a trip. It's about respect. You pawned the engagement ring I made for you with my own hands, lied about it, and then treated my feelings like they didn't matter at all." She crossed her arms tightly, her jaw set. "It's just a ring, Mason. You're making this into something it's not." Those words landed harder than I expected. I looked her in the eyes and said quietly, "It's not just a ring. I made that for you. It wasn't some store-bought piece of metal. It was a symbol. It meant something. About us. About the future we were supposed to have. And you treated it like it was nothing?" She stared at me, her expression like stone. Then, with a coldness that made something inside me crack, she said, "If you're this obsessed with a piece of jewelry, maybe you need to rethink what marriage is supposed to mean." I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in that moment. "You're right," I said. "I do need to rethink this. Because clearly, we don't see marriage or respect the same way." Her eyes widened slightly, clearly not expecting that. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means this is over," I said, steady and unwavering. "I canceled the wedding. I'm done. You've shown me exactly where you stand, and I'm not going to keep pretending everything's okay when it's not." Her mouth dropped open. "You canceled the wedding?" she shouted, without even talking to me. I nodded, mirroring her earlier words. "I didn't think I needed your permission." She stood there, speechless, trying to find the words, but there was nothing left to say. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the weight of what she had done. The days that followed were almost dreamlike. Lauren packed up her things and left. She didn't say where she was going. I didn't ask. I was done chasing her, done trying to understand what was going on inside her head. The silence in the house was strange at first, but also freeing. The air felt lighter, like I could finally breathe again. Weeks passed. I started rediscovering pieces of myself. Little things like listening to music in the morning, cooking for one without feeling empty, walking max without that anxious tug in my chest. I was moving on, slowly, but surely. Then, a week ago, I got a message from Lauren. "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide if I should even acknowledge it. But I didn't owe her anything, not anymore. Whatever she wanted to say wouldn't undo the damage. It wouldn't bring back the version of us that I had once believed in. So I left it on read. That was the last I heard from her. And honestly, good riddance. Now, about the ring. At first I thought maybe I'd just let it go, try to forget about it, but something about the way she discarded it so carelessly, like it had no value, kept gnawing at me. I didn't know if it was pride, anger, or just a deep desire to reclaim what I had created with my own hands. But I knew one thing. I had to get it back. The only problem? I had no idea where she'd taken it. Did I ask her? Absolutely not. I wasn't going to text her or give her the satisfaction. Instead, I started retracing steps. Lauren was all about convenience. She wouldn't go out of her way for anything, so I made a list of all the pawn shops located near her usual routines, on the route to work, close to her gym, near the grocery store she always used. One by one, I visited them, asking each if they'd seen a rose gold ring with a sapphire handcrafted, unique, likely pawned within the past few weeks. Most just gave me a polite shrug or said no. I was starting to lose hope. Then I walked into one last place. The guy behind the counter squinted when I described it. Did it have an engraving inside, maybe initials or a date? My heart skipped a beat. I had engraved our anniversary date on the inside of the band, something simple but meaningful. I nodded. Yeah, that's the one. He turned around, opened a drawer and pulled it out. And just like that, there it was. Seeing it again, lying in his palm under the shop lights, hit me harder than I ever expected. I didn't expect it to hit me the way it did, but the moment the ring was back in my hands, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been stolen, like something intimate and meaningful had finally returned to its rightful place. Still, despite the satisfaction of retrieving it, I knew I couldn't keep it. Every time I looked at that ring, all I could see was betrayal, disrespect. Everything it was supposed to represent had been twisted into something else. It carried too much weight, too many memories I no longer wanted to hold on to. But now, with it back in my possession, I had the power to decide its fate. So, I made the call. I sold it. Bittersweet doesn't even begin to describe the feeling. Letting go of something I made with so much intention, something that was once a symbol of love, wasn't easy. But it was also liberating, freeing in a way I hadn't anticipated. Because that act, painful as it was, gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. I took the money and put it towards something I'd been dreaming about for years but never had the confidence or opportunity to start. A personal project, something entirely my own, no compromises, no second guessing, just mine. Pouring that money into a vision I truly cared about felt like reclaiming not just the ring but myself, my time, my creativity, my purpose. It was symbolic in the best way possible, turning a painful chapter into the seed of something new. When Lauren found out that I'd tracked down the ring and sold it, she called me in a rage. "The hell, Mason, that was my ring. You had no right to sell it." I didn't flinch. I told her, calm and plain. "I had every right. I made that ring. You pawned it without saying a word. If it meant so little to you that you were willing to trade it for party money, why do you care what I did with it?" She sputtered, grasping for some defense, then tried to spin it like she'd always planned to get it back. "You're so dramatic," she muttered. But I didn't argue. I'd said my piece. That ring, like the relationship it symbolized, was mine to reclaim and mine to release. Selling it wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing myself for once. And that choice felt like healing. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. If you're hearing this and going through something similar, if you're caught in that strange, painful limbo between betrayal and letting go, here's what I'll tell you. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Don't stay just because you've invested time or memories. That's not love, that's an obligation, and you deserve more than that. You deserve someone who sees your worth clearly, someone who values your loyalty, your effort, your heart, not someone who tosses it aside and expects you to pick it back up like nothing happened. As for me, I'm still moving forward one day at a time. Work's going well. I've got a few good friends who showed up for me when everything else fell apart. I've started reconnecting with the things that make me feel whole again. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm building something solid, something real. A life on my own terms.